So this video is called Removing Knowledge in Order to Find Treasure. Now, whether you have a particular goal in mind or you're simply goal-oriented for its own sake and you're ready to take the plunge into content creation, you're ready to take control of your life, so to speak. The very first thing we learn in pretty much all esoteric and spiritual traditions is that there's a kind of sacredness to ignorance. That when we're ignorant of challenges and we are ignorant of the world, we actually allow curiosity to come in. We can treat the word ignorance almost like a virginal imagination. And that's really where we want to get to. We want to remove the cynicism and the doom that the world has taught us. But how do we do that? We all know, though. It comes down to silence. Now, we can go off onto a mountaintop, we can go into a monastery, you can go to an ashram or a commune. There's a lot of things you can do to achieve that kind of disciplined silence. But as creatives, as artists, we're trying to create a kind of filter on our senses as we navigate social media. This is the marketplace of ideas. It's where we get influences, we get information, and we transmute it, right? So how do we craft a mind that doesn't accrue too much? How can we be like a ship that sails that doesn't get barnacles and salt build up on it? Well, the answer comes down to, are you experimenting? And at the end of the day, are you filtering out what you've experimented with? For example, today, I spent a lot of time working on a mood board, and then I spent a lot of time pursuing my reply guy strategy on Twitter, on X. Now, one of those is incredibly intentional. The mood board is an internal process that allows me to map out where the treasure is, this treasure that I'm looking for. It's me narrowing down the colors, the forms, the inspirations, the few images that I focus on that keep my mind deaf to all of the incoming stimulus. So when we hold something like a well-crafted mood board in our mind and intentionally dive into the belly of the beast of YouTube, social media, and start engaging, I found that my engagement was a lot more fluid, and it wasn't actually even strategic. I simply went into the tavern of X and made my piece, made my memes, said my replies, and had fun with it. And that was the key part, is that I was having fun. I let the flow of the internal work start, and I carried the items that I needed to go into battle so that when I got into the fray of all sorts of negative information and all sorts of hysterical and sensational spectacle, I was able to block all this incoming information that's really other people trying to make their statement and make what they're saying seem as relevant as possible in the moment. And that is a technique that has taken me many years to kind of really integrate. Because it's like if you're walking into a bar and you are so goal-oriented in the moment. I want to meet someone tonight. I want to make a friend tonight. And you're so concerned with the outcome in the moment You might have forgotten the reason why your body wanted to be social. And it's because before going out, you had a bigger vision that socializing is a process where you get to communicate who you are. But then the moment you enter into the social situation, you tense up. In the moment you should be giving energy from a particular frame, this mood board frame, is the moment that you actually take in everything. You take everyone else's energy in too seriously. And so one of the things I've learned from actively engaging with the noise of social media is that it becomes easier when you have a strong vision in mind. Even if that vision is something you have to rebuild every day, and it's not, this magically imbued thing that was God-given or whatever. Even though deep down I believe these things are, it's just that we don't give enough strength to that internal disposition to hold on to the heaviness of the gift of creativity, the gift of having a personal mission, and that it's kind of easier to just let that go and be bombarded by social media and feel compelled to really internalize everything you're witnessing and watching. So the more we can remove sources of so-called knowledge that are outside of the frame that we've built, the more we can be ignorant selectively to all the things around us, then the more accurately we can hone in on the few skills, the few inputs that really matter. However, there is a caveat that in the beginning of social media exploration, one has to get known. You have to make your moves rapidly in many different areas. And this is where experimentation differs from raw repetition. You see, somebody like Leonardo da Vinci was someone who experimented with many things. Like, he was a genius for the fact that he was curious above all else. Harnessing that kind of curiosity is the ultimate frame. And I believe it was his fundamental visualization process that did all of that. So we can take away from this video that there is a kind of internal map that your mind is already creating. But the question is, are you focused on the details of the map as they fill in? Or are you keeping your mind focused on the treasure? It is so much more important to remove everything that possibly gets in the way of what you naturally value. Getting to that space of natural value, for some of us, like me recently, requires getting to a really low point where you are simply tired of the whole thing. You're tired of what you're doing. You're tired of all the inputs. And you simply want an excuse to create. And that creating through and forward, that creating as a forward escape mechanism, is the iterative process. And when you start thinking in terms of, can I write something with every action? Is there a little story that I'm trying to tell with every little action? And the beauty of something like Twitter and X is that you get to iterate on tiny little stories. You get to see, what does my real authenticity look like? What does my real humor look like? And if you haven't started to take that more seriously, while at the same time having fun with it, well, let this be an excuse for you to riff off of ideas that you have in the morning throughout posts in the day on Twitter and other written platforms. And then at the end of the day, you can do what I do, where you synthesize it out into these practice vlogs. Now, there will be a time here in the near future where these videos get increasingly more scripted and they go beyond just the rough drafts that you see here. But these are the practice reps. This is the formation moment, all the dress rehearsals that will lead up to the more value-driven content that I know this channel can produce and that I know people deserve. However, the unscripted vlogs as they are right now are literally just a soothing process for me to feel the creativity in the moment. And I'm not getting so caught up in the immediate details of where I am at on the journey. I simply know that I'm moving forward. So the big takeaway is we remove in order to be able to experiment. But know the difference between experimenting with noise that's coming in versus output. And the volume of experimental output is not something that will ever be a waste of time once you have this treasure in mind. But it also serves as a means of polishing the vision of that treasure, even if you're not quite sure why you're ambitious or where you're going. The fact that you're even going is increasing your chances of discovering that treasure.